Our next guest knows the devastation and heartbreak of the Israel-Palestine conflict only too well. She is a news anchor for Channel 14, a channel in Israel that is on a mission to fight for the truth and pave the way for more right-leaning, less woke media in Israel. That would be good. She joins us now here, Lital Shemesh. Lital, welcome to Outsiders, and more importantly, welcome to Australia. Great.
Thank you so much
to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Now, let's start with something that's not all that pleasurable, which is a month ago your uncle and your son and his son, were murdered by Palestinian terrorists in Judea and Samaria. Tell us about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're dealing with a very hard year in Israel. Over 35 Israelis were murdered by Palestinian terrorists. It was actually the most lethal year since the Second Intifada regarding terrorism coming from Palestinian terrorists and from the Gaza Strip. And unfortunately, it got close to home when my uncle and his son got murdered a month ago by Hamas terrorists in Judea and Samaria. Yeah.
Why don't we hear about this, Lital? What is it that you're in the more conservative media, if you like, or the right side of the media, but the media worldwide is so biased against Israel. Why do we not hear about these atrocities?
100%. The media is doing a really bad job in covering what is really happening in Israel. In the good case, it will cover the story. In the worst case, it will completely change the narrative. When you scroll down international media, the headlines would always be around a Palestinian was killed by a police officer. Only when you read the item, you understand that Palestinian was actually a terrorist who was actually stabbing Jews. And most of the people are not really well informed on what is going on. They just read headlines and they're not really getting the true picture of what is really happening in Israel and what we are suffering from for so many years, for over 100 years, pure anti-Semitism coming from different sources, from the Palestinian Authority, who is actually paying money to families of terrorists, paying money to shaheeds, naming schools after names of terrorists, and doing whatever it can to create another generation who is hating Israel instead of just, teaching their kids peace, teaching their kids how to live side by side with their neighbors. They have a pay-for-slay method. The more you kill, the more you're getting paid, and it's just a shame.
James.
Just a shame.
Lital, I want to move on to something that's possibly a bit more positive news here. I want to ask about Bibi Netanyahu's declaration at the UN last week that they're on the verge of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. Now, to me, having grown up watching Saudi Arabia, this seems an extraordinary thing, but it also suggests to me that the Abraham Accords, which were one of the great achievements of the Trump administration, they're not dead. So tell us about that, and tell us about how that would reshape the map of the Middle East if we were to finally get normalized relations between Riyadh and Jerusalem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is actually incredible. I was covering the signing of the Abraham Accords in Washington, seeing Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain signing a peace agreement later on with Morocco and with Sudan. All these different Muslim countries who wants to get close to Israel, who actually says we have a joint interest in making this area flourish, in making this area be more successful, just putting aside the Palestinian issue, understanding that the way to peace is actually getting closer to Israel. And the news about Saudi Arabia signing a peace agreement, hopefully in the near future with Israel, is enormous. It's literally huge. You have to understand, obviously, there's also mutual interests, like we have a joint enemy where both countries are fighting Iran. Iran is the #1 terror funding country of the world. So we have a mutual interest in making peace flourish. And you have Israelis in the recent 2 years flying, vacationing in United Arab Emirates, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. It's amazing. It's amazing to see.
Sorry, I was just on a flight. We stopped in Abu Dhabi and up on the board with the flights to Tel Aviv, which was inconceivable before.
And can I just ask furthermore on that Iran thing, then, what is the reaction in Israel to Biden unfreezing billions of dollars for Tehran?
Yeah. So I think the entire world has to get to get up, to wake up, and to understand what Iran has been doing in the recent few years. Not only it's been violating every single rule regarding its nuclear deal, the world has to lift back the sanctions, to get back the sanctions against Iran. The poor Iranian people are demonstrating in the streets, calling for freedom, calling for equal right, calling for women's rights, and the world is just keeping one eye blind and not seeing what is happening. So I think both the U.S. administration and the entire world needs to understand that Iran is funding terrorism, billions of dollars each year for Iran's proxies all over the world, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, and you name it, and Hamas. This has to stop. It just literally has to stop.
Liz?
Do you believe that the US government doesn't already know that, though? Or do you think they genuinely don't know that?
I think the U.S. government is aware of that. I just think they have a different approach in how to deal with Iranian terrorism. Because when Trump was in power, Trump immediately lifted back the sanctions against Iran, immediately moved the embassy to Jerusalem. His method was, we're going to be strong. And we're going to be strong against world terrorism. And I think Biden has a completely different approach of thinking that if he will sit down and negotiate, the Iranians will conceal. But at the end of the day, the Iranians time and again are just not obeying the rules, not obeying the nuclear rules and doing whatever they want.
Lital, we've got a clip here of Bibi Netanyahu speaking at the UN. Just have a quick look at this.
Above all, Iran must face a credible nuclear threat. As long as I'm Prime Minister of Israel, I will do everything in my power to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
So, Lital, this backs up what you're saying. Now, Netanyahu then, this was last week, walked away a little bit from that nuclear idea. But what's the fear like in Israel? I mean, we mentioned, your uncle and his son. Ultimately, the Palestinian money is funded, if not by Western democracies, by Iran. Yeah. How realistic are people in Israel about the threat of Iran?
It's real. At the moment, it's our biggest threat, but it's not just the Iranian nuclear threats. It's also Iran transferring billions of dollars to Hezbollah up north, sending rockets up north to Lebanon, literally threatening Israel in a variety of ways. Luckily, we have the strongest army in the world. We can defend ourselves, but fighting for Israel means fighting for democracy, fighting for Western democracies. And time and again, I feel like the world is completely misunderstanding between good and bad, between people who are reaching their hand again and again for peace, and another entity, the Palestinian Authority, who is actually teaching their kids to hate Jews, and the world, as you were saying, it's not just Iran transferring money, it's European governments, it's US government transferring money without monitoring where that money is going, what it's being used for, and the world just really needs to wake up.
Lital Shmesh, so good to have you here on Outsiders. I hope we'll have you again. Enjoy your time in Australia. And please just say Hezbollah one more time. It's so good.
Hezbollah.
Fantastic. There you go. Have a great time in Australia. Thank you so much.